YouTube, welcome in to our USWNT Hour show. We get so many questions from people in the chat, on Twitter, in our DMs about the national team, about roster predictions, about player evaluations, about tactics, about everything. And today we are answering your questions. We're getting the inside scoop from our very own Lori Lindsey about all she has to say about the players, about the tactics, about the team, and so much more. Plus, we're taking a look back at last weekend's matches and doing a little bit of player evaluation, seeing which players stood out, which players impressed us, which still need to do a little bit more. All of this and so much more in today's USWNT Hour. Like this video and subscribe to Attacking Third YouTube page right now to join the conversation in the chat because we want to hear from you. Hello and welcome into the USWNT Hour show. I'm your host, Lisa Roman, alongside former United States international Lori Lindsey. If you're joining us live on youtube.com/attackingthird, join the conversation, like this video, subscribe, and you can listen to all USWNT Hour shows on the Attacking Third podcast. Download and subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, any place you listen to your podcasts. Lori Lindsey, welcome in. How are you, girl?
Yeah, great to see you, Elise. I mean, we didn't have last week, so it's been a couple weeks. So I'm happy to be here with you. And as we were talking off air, we were supposed to be having a tornado type weather here in Philly, and that is not the case because it's sunny and hot and humid. So who knows what's happening? I mean, I'm happy about this weather. But anyway, great to see you. How are you?
So good to see you. Yeah, this tornado warning was I was thrown off by it, but still sunny skies. We're only like a mile or so apart, not even. Still sunny skies, hoping that we don't get the tornado during this live because who knows about our Wi-Fi, what's going to happen there. But it is so good to see you today. We have a packed episode. We're going to do a little bit of weekend player reports and a player evaluation about how players did in their respective leagues. And also we are answering listeners' questions. So thank you everyone who submitted questions via the chat on Twitter. We got them all. I wrote them all down. There was so many of them. We're only going to run through some of them today because there was just so many, but we are really excited to answer your questions. Before we get going, I want to remind everyone that we have a $100 Paramount Plus gift card subscription to give away today. Congrats to all of our previous winners. We've had a few so far. We do one every single episode. To win this $100 Paramount Plus gift card, all you need to do is like this video and drop your social media handle without the @ symbol in the chat. We will pick a winner. You'll get a DM from us and you could win a $100 Paramount Plus gift card. So like this video and drop your Instagram handle in the chat because we want people to win. Hello, that's what we're here for. Then you can watch the NWSL, you can watch Serie A, CONCACAF, everything that is coming up. Let's dive into it because we had NWSL week 3, essentially. Some teams have 3 games under their belt. Some teams have 1 game under their belt. A lot of back and forth in the league right now, but coming off of a packed weekend of NWSL games, there's 12 teams, only 10 of them played this weekend. 1 game was postponed due to COVID, but we had a lot of good results. And surprisingly enough, the 2 expansion sides from California, San Diego Wave FC and Angel City, are at the top of the standings, number 1 and number 2, respectively. Lori, what did you see this weekend? You were on call for a couple games. I know you tuned into a lot of them, but overall impressions of the NWSL from this weekend for you?
Yeah, chaotic in some ways, as you mentioned. And we wouldn't expect anything less, right, at the beginning of this season. I think we might have mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, too, just that the start of this season was going to be interesting because, some teams are on 1 game, some teams are on 3. You have teams that have had a lot of breaks or a pretty consistent schedule. Others that's been a little bit hectic because of the Challenge Cup. And I think, anytime that you start to have 2 expansion teams plus we had divisions, obviously, for the Challenge Cup. Now they start to mix. Then I think at any time you start to play different teams, you get a clearer picture or somewhat of a clearer picture of how teams are going to match up, right? And so, yeah, it just I think it throws everything into a big topsy-turvy, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of how I felt this weekend. It was unfortunate for the Gotham, North Carolina game to get postponed because of COVID, but definitely felt like the right decision for the safety of all players and everybody involved in that game. But that throws another wrench into it, right? Because now North Carolina, who goes one game against the City almost 3 weeks ago, and they won the Challenge Cup last weekend, or a little over a week ago. So I think it's so interesting. We'll see how this plays out. But yeah, chaos is a little bit of how I thought this all went this weekend.
I mean, chaos is the perfect word to describe it. If you look at the standings in the NWSL right now, 2 expansion sides, first and second, and North Carolina, who is a powerhouse in the league traditionally, they just won the Challenge Cup. They are ranked number 12. They're the last place team. However, every other team has at least 2 games in hand over them. So because of that, it changes the disparity a little bit. But as you mentioned it, Challenge Cup, it was all regional matchups. So we got to see Houston versus Louisville so many times. And now Houston, they're just kind of continuously playing their same teams. By the time that June comes around, Houston's going to have a lot of challenges to face by starting to play other teams, because in their region, it was Kansas City, Racing Louisville, Chicago, and Houston. And this past weekend, Houston has continuously played teams in their region. But we did get to see some differences, because San Diego, they played Chicago. We got to see Angel City travel to the East Coast and take on the reigning NWSL champs in Washington Spirit. Let's talk about a little bit about this Angel City game, because so many players for Washington Spirit are on the national team and are just huge players. Andy Sullivan, the defensive midfielder for Washington Spirit, has been out with a calf injury for a number of games. She was out this game as well. But when you look at Angel City, they're a team that's proven that they can keep shutouts on the board. They can beat North Carolina Courage. They can beat teams like Washington Spirit. This match ended in a 1-0 win for Angel City, and the goal coming from none other than Christen Press. What did you think of this match, Laura?
To be honest, a bit shocked, right? I never really felt like the Spirit entirely got going. I kept wanting a little bit more from them. I thought Trinity Rodman was a handful consistently, but you see some of her frustration a bit throughout the game. And credit to Angel City. No offense to them, because they've had some good wins, right? We saw them play at home the last 2 weeks and get the results that they, not against Orlando, obviously, but 1-1 coming to this game, but still some performances I think that not everybody was expecting given their Challenge Cup performances. So coming into this game, I didn't have like a ton of high hopes for the expansion team, just given how good I consider the Washington Spirit, how many threats they have.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Andy Sullivan. Kelly O'Hara obviously didn't play. She has a bit of an injury. You have Dorian Bailey, who's making her way back. We saw Baggett go down in the Challenge Cup final, so still out for her.
Ashley Sanchez didn't get a start in this match. She came in the second half for Chris Ward.
Exactly. You saw the tempo up incredibly once Sanchez came on. But, credit to Angel City. They traveled cross country. They had an understanding of their game plan. Freya Coombe even talked about the tactical change that they made with Press switching sides, playing against Goff. That's how she got the goal, playing on as a left winger instead of the right wing, where she originally started this game. So an incredible finish, right, for her. I think that Angel City will be extremely thrilled with that performance. And then I think you're going to look at Washington Spirit, who will not be thrilled at all, right?
Yeah.
And a team that's still, in some ways, I think, recovering, because they had a lot of games in a short amount of time, which I think in general, at least, this is like what we're seeing, right? Some of the teams have done pretty well in the Challenge Cup, maybe haven't really gotten the results they wanted early on in the season, where the teams that didn't, are looking pretty fresh and doing a bit better. But I mean, all of this to be said, and in this game in particular, I think super early on in the season, and tough to say as this kind of starts to roll out. I mean, I don't have any answers at this point in time, because some of these things are a bit shocking to me, but I love it. So I'm like, let's go.
I love it. You don't have any answers, but a month ago, did you predict that Angel City San Diego would be the top two? I know.
In fact, I thought, a month ago, maybe San Diego would hovering about like middle of the park, and
Mhm.
Angel City, I was like, goodness gracious, not so much. I'll be curious though, because this is going to be a long season right now. And, even if we're just taking this Angel City and Washington Spirit team, when you look at the Washington Spirits roster, a lot of depth, right? And so we're
Right.
seeing rotation of players. We're seeing, you could change out at least 4 of those players just from last night, maybe 5 that aren't typical starters. And outside of Allie Riley, that's the starting lineup consistently for Angel City. So there's a pretty big disparity there. And I thought Lucy did really well having to cover that position against Trinity Rodman. No, thank you if I'm Tyler Lucy.
Oh,
um,
heck no.
I thought she actually did really well for a player that doesn't usually play that position. So, I think when
And
you
that's something that I'm gonna give some credit to head coach Freya Coombe for that one, because she also took Jasmine Spencer, who was a forward through and through, and Spencer has been starting and dominating in the right back for Angel City. And then you look at a player like Tyler Lucy, who has the fundamentals of a soccer player and the physicality to match up against Eternity Rodman. So why not throw her in the back line? That's
yeah.
what Coombe does. She can look at players' individual talents and their personality traits almost, and move them from forward into the back line. So good luck, Tyler Lucy, getting out of that back line.
Well, right. I also do think it speaks though to one issue that I see potentially can become like more of a problem down the line is the lack of depth that they have.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously,
I mean, that's already been a bit of a problem.
oh yeah, certainly, and that's why Tyler Lucy. You don't have anybody else that's a natural left back that makes more sense to go against a Trinity Rodman, right? Now you still have Madison Hammond, who I think started the season well, but Reed coming in and seemingly having a better partnership alongside Gilles. So that's been the main center back partnership. Obviously, we're going to see Paige Nielsen come in, and then there was like a chaotic situation with her earring that took like the rest of the game to come out, so she never came on. So I mean, listen, we talk about chaos. There's that in general is like the funniest story of the weekend to me. However, I'm just saying I'll be very curious because I think it is a long season, right?
Yeah.
And injuries happen. I'll be curious just to see what in terms of maybe a Tobin Heath, right? I did hear she was at the game
Right.
last night. What does that mean? Is there something in the works? I don't entirely know that. Haven't started working my magic to try to find behind the scenes information there.
Come
But
on, Lori. This is why we bring
no,
you on. Let's go.
I'll report back next week, okay? If there hasn't been any sort of like news break before then. But I think that there's just a lot of questions still for every team, and we obviously highlighted that game, but still.
Yes. So for those asking, I see Stephen in the chat here asking about Tobin Heath. She was with Arsenal, ended and terminated her contract early, came back to the States. She was at the Washington Spirit Angel City game that played at Audi Field in Washington, D.C. But as Lori reported, no news yet. But Lori, get on that. Report back. We'll find out about that one.
Don't worry.
I love to hear that. So Christen Press, she knocked down a goal in that game. She's a player that we've talked a lot about. We're going to talk a little bit more about her later in this episode, but there's another national team player that has been on a bit of a tear in the NWSL with San Diego Wave FC, Alex Morgan. She's been in the national team camp for years, such a namestay, but not called in most recently, wanting to get a lot of consistent time at the club level. And that's exactly what we're seeing from Alex Morgan. Last week, 4 goals for Alex Morgan. She broke a record, became one of just 3 players to do that in the NWSL, 2 of those being a penalty kicks in San Diego's win over Gotham FC. And then most recently, this last weekend, week 3 in the NWSL regular season, Alex Morgan, she gets another penalty kick goal in the match against Chicago Red Stars. San Diego ends up winning this match 2-1, but Alex Morgan gets on the board first for the Wave with that penalty kick. So 3 PK goals from Morgan in the last 2 weeks. But run of play, how she's been doing. What are your thoughts on Alex Morgan in this NWSL run and getting so much consistent time with San Diego?
Yeah, I think that's just it, right? She's healthy. It seems like she's extremely happy being in San Diego. She's been vocal about that. Regardless of people's individual thoughts on that. Like she was mentioning that this is the first time that she's actually been happy playing with a club team. So, awesome for San Diego because they're getting the best out of her. And I think this is a player that we've known from the very start of her career at international level that she can score goals. Get her in front of the net, she will score goals. And especially if she's having fun, especially if the style of play is an attacking style of play, which we do see from San Diego. So, and then also a player that understands what it means to step up. I mean, 3 penalty kicks in 2 weeks is a lot, obviously, but to finish all 3 chances is a whole nother thing, right?
And differently. She finished them very differently.
So to have a player that you rely on in those positions, that's not easy, right? I mean, the kickers has the advantage, right? We always say that. However, when you're somebody that's consistently taking them, it reminds me a lot of Megan Rapinoe. In those moments when you need somebody to step up and convert, Alex Morgan clearly has the confidence to do that. And you're seeing a confident striker right now. I mean, listen, there's been a lot of talk on this show, but just in general of the U.S. national team players, what it means. And to me, she's proving herself, right? Like, I'm not so sure she needed to prove herself. It was just about staying healthy and playing consistently. But that is something Vlatko Andonovski has talked about, is getting back these players and seeing how they do. And she's taken those opportunities.
I agree completely. It's really fun and impressive to watch Alex Morgan play. And she's talked about that, getting consistent time, being happy, being in a rhythm with the team. Because as a national team player, when you're playing with your club team and leaving every month or every other month to go play with a different team, it's really hard to get that consistency and that rhythm. I want to ask about this, though. Alex Morgan didn't draw these penalty kicks. Now, yes, she did finish them all, but the first 2 going up against Ashlyn Harris, who knows her very well and knows how to defend against her. And then the second time going up against Alyssa Nair for Chicago Red Stars. Is this still a big positive for Alex Morgan, despite having the advantage, despite not being the player that actually caused the penalty kicks, but still having the confidence to knock them down?
Well, I think it's even more impressive because you're playing against 2 goalkeepers that know you extremely well. And no doubt with these goalkeepers have studied or faced Alex for a number of training sessions with the national team, and just understand her tendencies as a player in general. So, yeah, I mean, I think, there's the composure to step up and take them, even if you don't draw it, right? Like, I mean, sometimes that might even be better because then you just have a bit more calmness to your approach. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a player that you could make the argument is one of the best strikers right now in the league, if not the best, right? I mean, we would have put Malpew in that certainly a few weeks ago, right? But then gets concussed and now has been out for a number of weeks, so isn't playing. So, I mean, outside of that, I would say, like, give me the names of who's playing better, right? As a striker solely, right? So
yeah, I agree completely. And we're going to talk about it more. Christen Press, Alex Morgan, should they be back in the national team roster? We're going to do all of that in the second half of this episode. Before we jump to our break, I want to ask you, Lori, any other players that stood out to you this weekend in games that you watched in the NWSL, in the FA Cup? Congrats to Chelsea on that win. Anything else? Final thoughts from you about player evaluation or players that stood out? We know you were on the KC call. Anything there from you?
Yeah, well, I would say 2 players that I think have stood out in this game, because I was also on the Cascaded rivalry, and Sam Coffey for Portland is one that continues to catch my eye, because I think she plays a rookie who we've mentioned, and other players or other commentators have mentioned in the broadcast. This is a player at Penn State that played more in an attacking role, now finds herself in a deeper position, but I feel is playing beyond her years. And I just mean in terms of, one, confidence, but just the calmness in her approach. I don't think I personally see a player in the NWSL in that position currently that plays like she does, which is a real understanding of, like, switching the point, like switching play when necessary, getting the wing backs involved, which is typically Klingenberg and Kuika, right? And does a really good job with her positioning. I mean, on the ball, she's composed. She can get forward. She can get into positions to strike, to take shots herself, but they don't really need her to do that, right? That's an extra bonus, but she's somebody that links really well. And I want to preface this by saying, listen, I think she deserves a call up, and we can talk about this when it comes to our like mailbag section. But like, I do think that she deserves a call up because of how right now limited the national team is in that sixth position. And I think it'll be interesting. Now, I don't think she's exposed in that sixth position with Portland as she potentially could be with the way that the national team plays. So that's a whole nother question. But I do think that that is somebody that I would imagine Vlatko certainly has his eye on right now.
I love to hear that from you. It's also really important to note, you mentioned Sam Coffey out of Penn State. She did not play a six, a defensive midfield throughout her collegiate days. She played higher up the field, and Rian Wilkinson at Portland understood that she needed someone to fill that role. I think losing Angela Salem was a big loss for Portland, who retired for the Thorns, and to have a rookie in Coffey that can step in is very impressive. It almost makes her ability to play that position so much more impressive because that's not her typical spot to play in. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Sam Coffey. Should she be on the roster? Christen Press, Alex Morgan, all of these players, and so much more in the second half of our episode. We'll be right back after this quick break.
The land under our feet, everyone is here to steal from it.
Joe Pickett.
Game warden. What are you doing investigating a murder?
Who's there?
I'm going to enjoy running all you out of town.
Sometimes power is more powerful than the truth.
Can't even see where the danger's coming from.
Joe, what happened to your face?
Game warden business.
Welcome back to the USWNT Hour show. We are so excited to have you here with us. We have a $100 Paramount Plus gift card to give away during this live. All you need to do is like this video and drop your social media handle in the chat without the @ symbol. So that's Twitter or Instagram handle, and you are entered to win a $100 Paramount Plus gift card. We'll pick a winner. We'll send you a DM, like this video, and drop your social media handle in the chat for a chance to win. Lori, it's our mailbag segment time. We get so many questions and prompts from so many of our listeners, and we love it. People drop them in the chat. They've dropped them on Twitter, Apple Podcasts reviews, and we see them and we read them all. But this time I was compiling them all. We specifically asked people for questions, and man, did you guys deliver. We got so many questions. So if you have questions for us and for Lori about the USWNT and the tactics, the players, the personnel, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, drop your questions in the comments, and also on Twitter @attacking third. And you can reply to our mailbag tweets asking for the questions, and you will get them answered right now in our mailbag segment. So lots of different questions. I appreciate everyone for dropping them in. We're going to start with a few questions about new players coming in. We were just talking about Sam Coffey with the Portland Thorns. She's playing that sixth role, a rookie in the NWSL. We had a number of questions about this from Skeely Pug. What are the players on the cusp of entering the national team? Fallon Tullis-Joyce, Allie Watt, Sam Coffey. Also, Yumi Schultz asked about Carson Pickett, if she would ever be called into the USWNT Hour. And also, Football We 1992 mentioned that it's the start of the season and there are some very good performances. Other considered for a USWNT call-up. So, Lori, I'm turning this over to you. I want to know your expertise. We already talked a little bit about Sam Coffey, but Tullis-Joyce, Allie Watt, Carson Pickett. Let me pick your brain. What do you got? Who's stepping up besides Sam Coffey? We can continue with her as well, though.
Yeah, I think it's a challenging one because, I think sometimes we think just because you have the NWSL and somebody's playing well that you should automatically be called up into a national team, right?
So I have a theme for this segment. Yeah. It's going to be called "Who Are They Outperforming?" Because I have a feeling we're going to hear that a lot.
Yeah, because I always say that because I think that there is a misconception that it's like terrible if you just do really well and you play really well in the NWSL, but you don't get called up. Like it is a completely different level. I mean, I always say this all the time, and it's just because you do compete well in the NWSL does not mean that you're going to always get called up to the national team because, again, it depends on needs. It depends on, the timing of year. Like this is a really challenging time.
Yeah.
Tullis-Joyce, who you mentioned, no doubt has been great this season, right? is this the time to bring her in right when you're about to go into World Cup qualifying? No, I would say not, right? And you have the people that are in front of her, Alyssa Nair, Kingsbury, whoever, I can't even think.
Casey Murphy.
When she gets back, right? Those are 3 goalkeepers that I would currently put in front of Tullis Joyce. It doesn't take anything away from Tullis Joyce's performances by any means. She's kept OL Reign in some games that are have been really tight. So all the credit to her, because I think she's been fantastic and exactly what you want from your starting keeper if you're the Reign. But like that doesn't mean that you get called in, right? And like another one I was going to tell you about prior to this segment, along with Coffee, I would say Elise Bennett. I thought she has been great, whether she's coming off the bench, whether she is starting, clearly has proven that she can do way more than be somebody that can like affect the game getting in behind. She can hold up play, right? She's smooth with the ball. She has great size. And when she came on the game the other night, completely changed.
She changed everything. She changed everything in that match for Kansas City.
And her and Hamilton, there's an excellent connection, just like you would expect Hamilton. And we've seen Hamilton with Lynn Williams, right? So awesome. Do I think Elise Bennett is completely ready to go into the national team? No, because look at the people that are playing in front of her. Right? I mean, we just named Alex Morgan. You see Trinity Rodman, right? Kristen Press. Malpugh had been excellent up until she got injured. You still for sure put Sophia Smith in there, even though I think there's some opportunities that she should be finishing. That might sound harsh, but like the amount of opportunities she creates for herself, she's got to find the back of the net, right? More often, in my opinion. But listen, so there you go. Like it is like outrageously difficult to find yourself on the national team. And I think we have to be careful with just continuing to push that like the national team is the end all be all. Yes, this is the national team hour. So awesome. But like totally freaking great if you're amazing in the NWSL and you sometimes you're not going to get a call up. I always say that in the men's game all the time. Right?
Yeah, it's incredibly true. I love that you mentioned Elise Bennett. This is a rookie that probably wasn't expecting to get as much time with Kansas City as she has been given because of Lynn Williams playing in front of her. Lynn Williams, unfortunately, goes down with an injury and she's out for the rest of the year. So Matt Potter for the Current is calling on Elise Bennett and seamlessly transition into these games that she's been playing and a true game changer for Kansas City. I agree. She's not quite there yet, competing alongside Trinity Rodman, Sanchez, Hatch, Macario up top. It's a different style. Maybe next year, right? She's just a rookie in the NWSL, but we know that Vlatko Andonovski is watching these players and watching these teams. Someone else I want to ask you about, Carson Pickett, defender for North Carolina Courage. She just won the Challenge Cup with the Courage. She did play on youth U.S. teams, U17, and most recently U23, but that was in 2015. She's 28 years old, but a lot of experience in the league and does a great job getting into the attack. What are your thoughts on her, or is the lineup just a bit too much in front of her at outside back?
Yeah, no, I think that's also goes to the point that like, it really just depends on what the coach is looking for, right? And unfortunately, sometimes they decide that they're going to like a player over another. That's what it comes down to, right? Because I do think, Carson Pickett has been an interesting one. I like her a lot. I know Sean Nahas, North Carolina Courage coach, has been kind of vocal about hoping that she gets called in because he considers her the best left back. I mean, she's a true lefty, right? Something that we don't typically see. And, what I thought was interesting is at least in the April call-ups that she didn't get a call-up. We saw Imani Dorsey, right, get called in, who's a left back for Gotham, but then they didn't even dress Imani for either of the games. And so in my opinion, and that's just how it goes sometimes, right?
And Imani's also dealing with a little bit of an injury.
Yeah. So, and Carson just came off of one as well.
Right.
But however, I think when you look at the stats solely for North Carolina and how much Carson Pickett affects their game in the attack, I think there is some real promise that we've seen consistently for a few years now.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't just like, real promise in this year's Challenge Cup. Like, this has been ongoing. So I am a bit surprised, but I do think at that point in time, it does depend on, okay, listen, what is the coach actually looking for? And that Vlatko has been vocal about Fox. Sorry, I was like,
Okay. There's a number of outside backs. I mean, Emily Fox, Sophia Huerta has been tremendous. You still have Kelly O'Hara that's thrown into that mix. Margaret Purse.
Yeah.
Margaret Purse.
Yeah. I mean, Crystal Dunn is about to have that baby anytime. And then she's been also
It'll be 2 weeks and she'll be back on the pitch because she hasn't left it yet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So listen, there's, and I think that is certainly in Vlatko's mind, right? Like, I don't know all the decisions, but I understand how decisions work at that level for the most part. And, I can't tell you exactly why he hasn't brought Carson in, especially into like maybe one of the earlier ones. Now I think it starts to get a little bit difficult.
Right.
Maybe not. Maybe for these June camps, Carson will get called in, especially with how well North Carolina Courage did in this Challenge Cup, and Carson Pickett was a big part of that.
Yeah.
However, I think he has said, like, right now, Crystal Dunn was the starting left back, difficult to get her off the field. She becomes pregnant. Emily Fox, difficult to get her off the field, right? He has been like, listen, this is my go-to left back. Seems to really love the way that she plays. And here we are. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's still a lot of depth at that outside back position. And it's also a position that rarely gets rotated throughout the games. And maybe that's because of the personnel, as you just mentioned, because Crystal Dunn was there and you're not taking her off for anything. And now Emily Fox slots in. You're doing everything in your power to keep them on the pitch for 90 plus minutes a game. I want to look at some of the veterans. We got a great question from Brooke Oace, I'm going to say. Sorry about that, Brooke, but thanks for this great question. Will some of the veterans be back on the roster for June games? There's a friendly between June 20th and June 28th, I believe. She mentioned Tobin Heath, Kristen Press, Alex Morgan, Megan Rapinoe, and Sam Mewis. Now, Mewis dealing with a bit of an injury, Megan Rapinoe coming back from injury, getting more and more minutes with OL Reign. But thoughts on these veteran players, Lori Lindsey?
Okay, Lisa Roman. Listen, I mean, I think Alex and Kristen will get called in. I think, and honestly, I think if Becky Sauerbrunn is, it did sound like she almost came into the game the other night, right, and then maybe like tactically just how the game was going. I do think she could certainly be in the mix. She is the captain, or has been the captain, right? And just need to recover from the injury. And as soon as she gets minutes, I think that is a player that will absolutely, especially Tierna Davidson being gone, Doll Kemper being a little bit in and out with some injuries and I think concussion protocol maybe.
Yes, concussion protocol.
So I think those three for sure. I will be curious about Megan Rapinoe. I do not think Tobin Heath right now. Tobin didn't play a ton of minutes. I think she's coming back from injury. She's clearly not playing right now, right? Whatever's happening behind the scenes, though. And like, listen.
You'll tell us next week.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you next week once I figure out what's happening, if I can figure it out. However, this isn't like these players are just like floating around, not knowing what's going on. Like, there is precise communication that's taking place. Vlatko and his staff are having conversations with all the head coaches, right? Like, this information is being trickled down. There's constant communication on what coaches like plugging different players on their teams. So this is an ever evolving conversation. This isn't just like, oh, I hope I get called in. I hope you think I'm playing well, right? Like, Vlatko would be calling and talking to these players as well. So I'll be curious though about Megan Rapinoe. She brought energy to the game on Friday night. I personally thought she played the best ball of the game. You don't see many players. It was a ball into Allie Watt that created a chance. You do not see many players playing that type of ball in this league, right? So now, granted, regardless of age, whatever you want to say, I think, age question is relevant in some cases and pretty hilarious in others and not necessary. It's like, if you're playing well and you provide a role for what Vlatko and his staff is looking for, great. Get called in. Let's go. Let's move on. Right.
I agree completely. I think it needs to be shouted a little bit more from the rooftops that these players know they are in communication with the coaching staff, that it's not just like randomly getting a phone call on a Saturday afternoon saying, hey, we need you to come to camp tomorrow. It's a little bit there's a bit more dialogue to that, and they are in communication with Sam Ewis about her recovery. She's coming back from a bit of an injury and dealing with that. So like, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Mewis get called in, or maybe be called in, but only to be seen by the U.S. staff to work on her recovery. But that doesn't mean she's out for the World Cup by any means. I think Sam Ewis is one of the players that Vlatko Andonovski definitely wants to have on his roster in that midfield. All right, Lori, I want to move up the field a little bit, look at some of the forwards. We got a lot of questions about the forward group for the United States women's national team. Yumi Schultz, she mentioned Katarina Macario. She mentioned having Macario, Mallory Pugh, and Sophia Smith. They're the starters when Ashley Hatch, a player for Washington Spirit, is scoring almost every single game since returning, and she scored against a top 12 team in Australia back in November during those friendlies. So among this new generation of forwards between Macario, Pugh, and Smith, how does Hatch fit into that trio?
Yeah, I think this is the one that's like a bit the most interesting probably and complex, because it goes back to what we were saying. She does really well at the NWSL level and consistently provides, and I think is such a good target and plays off of Sanchez and Rodman really well and with the Spirit. However, I think the tough one is there's just so much depth, right? And then you add Alex Morgan back in, maybe Christen Press. That depth becomes even more so than we already saw. So, and when those players, the veteran players that weren't even there in the last few international windows, Hatch was mainly just coming off the bench. Now, credit to her, she was scoring. So it was like every time she was coming on the field.
In like a minute. She stepped on the pitch and scored.
Yeah, no doubt. Her first touch all the time. So that is something to look at. But again, I think it depends on how she fills out the role, right? Mm-hmm. And particularly what Vlatko is looking for in that. Because if you're looking at Macario, who most likely right now is the starting number 9, that player's not going to come off the field that much, right? Yeah. Especially with the way that she plays and what they want. You're going to see the wingers come off more. So, in my opinion, or there's just going to be some rotation. You can drop Macario back. You can play her as a winger, right? And then you'll bring somebody in. But right now, I would say I personally really like how Hatch is playing. Mm-hmm. But I would say in terms of goal production and knowing exactly what you're getting from Alex Morgan with over 100, maybe even close to 200. I don't have the notes in front of me, caps, right? Like she's producing more than Hatch right now. And that's just the way it is. So it's a tough one. And that's why I say, like, more credit to you, fight for the national team. And also as everything continues to like unfold, the spots are tough to come by. And again, you could be playing lights out and that you might not get the call up. Just in terms of what positional amount of roster spots you want in different positions, right? So
yeah, there's so much disparity between this. And as people in our chat are blowing up, the forward conversation is so fun. I'll stat check you here a little bit, Lori. Alex Morgan, she's got 190 caps, 115 goals. Don't worry, that's what I'm here for. Producer, host, friend, I got your back. That's what I'm here for. Another question that we got about the forwards, Chris Murch. I love this question from him. Who will be the United States women's national team leading goal scorer for the 2022 calendar year? Who you got, Lori? She's thinking for those who are listening as a podcast. She's deep.
I wouldn't have this prepared. I missed this one.
I love throwing these at you. So if we look at our forwards that we have, Kat Macario, Mallory Pugh, Sophia Smith, Trinity Rodman, Ashley Hatch, Christen Press, Alex Morgan. We could throw Megan Rapinoe in that mix.
And this is the NWSL, or this is actually for the women's national team, right?
This is for the U.S. women's national team. So that means CONCACAF W qualifiers this summer and everything.
Yeah, Macario.
Okay.
Yep. I think the only reason why there might be a little bit of a hiccup is I'll be curious on what her training and everything looks like up until the June. So it's like another month, right? And she's essentially outside of playing. Well, that's untrue because she has I want to call it the Challenge Cup. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
The Challenge Cup.
FA Cup and
thank you. Champions League.
Champions League,
Yeah,
yes, because she's playing with Lyon.
Yeah, so that window gets a little bit shorter, and then she'll have a little bit of rest before the June international window. I was thinking it was a little bit longer, but it's actually not. So my answer sticks with Kat. I think Kat is certainly coming into her own. The position that she's playing, she feels, I think, comfortable as that kind of withdrawn 9 with the national team. And we've seen what her free kicks look like. I think there's going to be a multiple ways that she can score goals for the national team. So she's a hard, number 1 for me.
Wow. Okay. It took a little bit of thought from you.
Well, because I was still kind of halfway between the NWSL thinking, 2022 campaign of national team players in the NWSL. So that's where I was like, oh no. But no, with the national team, Kat.
Yeah, I totally respect that. Our chat is blowing up. Pew, 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 pew. She's dealing with a bit of a concussion right now. She can be a goal scorer, but I don't agree with Mallory Pugh. Honestly, if Alex Morgan gets called in, I could see Alex Morgan going on a tear, kind of as she's hitting her 200th cap with the national team. I don't know. I think Kat Macario is a great pick for this one as well, just because of how she's getting into this and the consistency that she has and how her teammates are playing off of her when she's with the national team, frankly. But we'll see. I like this. I like that question a lot. Thanks so much, Chris Murch. We're going to move on to a different position, one we've talked so much about with the national team. We got so many questions about the 6, the defensive midfield role for the United States women's national team. Amy, she mentioned that we're short on depth at the 6, and it's been discussed, but she wants to hear about Sam Coffey, which we've talked about as one to watch, a rookie, but commanding the spot after it as it's not her usual position. And also John Jackson saying, hey, I'm sorry to harp on the number 6, but do we need someone to step up, or do we retask one of our other midfielders as an attacking midfielder to drop into that role? We've talked a little bit about Sam Coffey, and we've talked so much about this 6, but as of right now, Andi Sullivan is not playing. She's out with a bit of a calf injury. I don't think that'll last too long, but when you look at the midfield for the United States women's national team, Lindsey Horan, Rose Lavelle, Ashley Sanchez, Andi Sullivan, Christy Mewis, Sam Mewis, what are your thoughts on this 6 role? Jalen Howe, Sam Coffey. I mean, who's going to fill this role?
Yeah, I mean, I still think Andi Sullivan for sure, but needs to get back and get playing, right? Relatively soon. And to me, it's about just constantly, managing the players when they are getting a lot of games and then going in for the international breaks as well. And it does seem like a little bit of fatigue has what set Andi back. So I'll be curious about that. And it sounds like, each week on the injury report, it's questionable. Yeah. So it's not, she's completely out. But that certainly plays into what's going to happen. Yes, I see in the chat here, Sad Dingus. Can Horan play 6? Yeah, we saw her play the 6 at the Olympics. I think it just depends on who you're playing against, because that player, the reason why, and we've talked about this before, that it's been challenging is because you could be exposed as a 6, right? Oh, yeah. You could be exposed as a 6 with the amount of numbers being thrown forward with our national team, the aggressive approach, and you have to be able to cover the ground, which these players that we've mentioned can. It's just about the defensive positioning and not getting caught in possession, and the ball turns over and then you're exposed in numbers even situations. So that's a whole nother conversation about tactics, but I would put Sam Coffey in there. I think that she deserves a call up, especially with Andi Sullivan being out. I personally like how she plays that position better than Howell. But clearly I'm not Blacko. So
yeah. What is it about Sam Coffey's role in that defensive 6 that gives her that leg up over the players that are already on the team, or even a player like Jalen Howell?
I like how Sam Coffey, to me, almost seems like a traditional 6, even though we've talked about her playing higher up, because she's constantly checking the way that she receives her ball, the way that she's checking over her shoulder. If she gets it from the left side, it's not like, hey, everything's going back to the left side. I'm going to open up my body and play it out to the other side. I don't think we see many players do that, right? And it's tough at this level to come in from a college level game, right? As a rookie, play the way that she's playing with composure, calmness on the ball, and the understanding of like players are coming at you from every angle. And to be able to have the ability to also bypass pressure and get herself out of the pressure. I don't think she complicates the game. I think her positioning puts her in good positions. She doesn't have to tackle necessarily. She just steps in and intercepts balls, or she makes the game predictable for the other players around her. So defensively, she doesn't have to be, somebody that's going to come in and like just get into hard tackles, right? So I would give her a call up. I would say 100% right now, I'd give her a call up. Given the situation that the team is in, I feel, with not a true player. But I also agree. Lindsey Horan can certainly play that position. I think we are going to see Andy Sullivan back sooner than later. I very much feel like Howell is in the mix still. And again, this is what soccer's all about, opinion, right? So just because I feel that like I like Sam Coffey and the way that she plays the six better than Howell, okay, who cares, right? Like, I mean, it's awesome. I care about my own opinion, but
I care, Lori. I care about your opinion. That's why I asked you. That's why I asked you these great questions. And that's so right about Sam Coffey, because a defensive midfielder, a six that plays simple and that you rarely notice as a casual fan watching the game, that's who you want, who can just switch the point of attack, take 1-2 touches, play calmly and really composed out of pressure. And she's not a big hard tackler that like we've seen Julie Ertz be in that role, where it's just a destroyer type mentality. However, if the players around you are aware of that, I think that Sam Coffey could be a really good call up for Vlatko Andonovski. So, hey, Vlatko, maybe if you're listening to this, you never know. We get some NWSL coaches that watch Attacking Third and tune in, but just Lori's 2 cents here. A good opinion base, though. I stand behind it, Lori. I'm with you. I like to hear your opinions on these. And number 6.
Yeah, actually, I do want to address this because I like this question. Stephen Cruz Jr. Is Coffey playing better than Howell, or is it the system? I did say that earlier, that, it could be the system, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, but still, regardless, you're playing at this level, and she did not seem phased in playing in the Cascadia rivalry in Portland on Friday night. She has been super consistent since day one. And it's a player that Rhian Wilkinson, their head coach, has said wants to get better. She's watching video. And yes, if you look at the players around her, Sugita and Sinclair in the midfield with her, like awesome. But she really comes out. So, I mean, I regardless of the system, I could care less. She is producing what she needs to. Now, is it a different level? Yeah, we constantly talk about that. It's a different level at the national team. Will she get exposed? Potentially. But then it's just about, that's when it changes with Vlatko, of making sure that everybody understands their roles. Like, is Horan in there with Coffey at the national team level? Do you pinch back in defensively, right? Like, all these things are a constant conversation. So
looking at the system and the formation tactically that Portland and Rhian Wilkinson are playing with Sam Coffey, playing essentially a 3-5 with 5 in the midfield, having Sinclair, Hina Sugita, and then Sam Coffey as that 6 with wide wing backs Megan Klingenberg and Kuika. When you look at how the U.S. plays traditionally in the past, does Coffey fit into that type of role, say alongside Lindsey Horan and Rose Lavelle in the midfield? How does that compare?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the team is going to evolve. I think as the team is evolving, right? And we'll have to. I mean, that's a constant as the game is changing globally as well. And the competition continues to get better, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that, like, I personally think there could be adjustments, right? And players we can get better at in different ways. It did having Julie Ertz in there suit the U.S. team? Absolutely, right? And then also you give up some things with that as well. However, Julie Ertz isn't here. So, like, we didn't have Macario consistently playing either. So there's a lot of different moving pieces. This is the first time we're seeing the front line of Sophia Smith and Macario and Malpew, right? So there's like a lot of changes. It's constantly changing. It's just really about understanding what the actual principles are, and really less about, the formation, in my opinion. It's like, okay, we do not want to give up the ball here, which would be a high risk situation. But we're fine with giving it up here as long as we have measures in place to protect us and not getting countered on or whatever, right? But the game is changing that way too, because you have Alana Cook, who's very good at 1v1 positionings, right? And as a center back, and the modern day center back has to be good 1v1 because you are going to get caught in transition sometimes, right? Like we see that all the time in the men's game. And I'm not comparing right now the women's game and the men's game. It's just more about, to me, things are evolving and they're always evolving. So yes, Coffee can play in that position. Can I ask just one other thing, Lisa, on the comment?
Yeah,
it's
of
good.
course.
I love the chat names. Astra De Keko, I think. I don't even know if that's sorry if that's not right. But would a center back be better as a 6? I appreciate that question because I always said last year when we had the same discussion, because Julie Ertz has been out for a long time, I thought Tierna Davidson would be excellent as a 6. And I thought she should play there last year. But Vako was adamant that she was the starting back next to whoever was healthy, whether that's Becky Sauerbrunn at the time, whoever, right? And but I asked for the center back that entire time for it to be Davidson.
Yeah, it would have kept Lindsey Horan higher up the pitch, which suits her so much better.
Yeah.
Than dropping into that role. I love that. I love all this feedback we're getting and everyone joining us in the chat. This has been so fantastic. We have so many more questions that we still have to get through. I want to close out on one final question from none other than Jess McDonald, forward for Racing Louisville. She tweeted at us at Attacking Third, and she asked, who has the fastest 40 on the roster? So a 40-yard sprint. Jess McDonald wants to know, Lori, from your professional analytic opinion of this U.S. women's national team roster, who's the fastest?
I mean, I feel like this is a trick question, Jess. I think if Jess was there, she would have the fastest 40. On the current roster, it always feels so tricky because
I know
players that you didn't think would be the fastest were. I mean, freaking Christy Pierce, she was 40 playing on the team and she had the fastest, right? Like it was wild. And we had Sydney LeBrew, we had all these and so, I'd be curious if it is Trinity Rodman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Emily Fox has some wheels as well.
That's a good shout. Yeah, I actually think that she might have the fastest 40. Yes,
We got to find out. We need to see stopwatch times.
We need Jess to find out for us.
Yes, Jess, shout out to you for asking this question. We don't have a definitive answer. Can you find it out for us, Jess McDonald? That would be great. Thank you for these questions. Everyone, we got so many more questions about if the World Cup was starting next week, who would Lori Lindsey have on the roster, 23-player roster? We also have a lot of goalkeeper questions asking about Fallon Tullis-Joyce and a starting goalkeeper if the World Cup was happening tomorrow. We don't have time to get into it today, but luckily we get to do this every single week. So we'll get to those questions next week. Reminder, if you have questions for us, you can drop them on Twitter at Attacking Third. You can leave them in our comments or go to Attacking Third on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review asking about a USWNT Hour question, and Lori and I will answer them. Lori, final thoughts before we sign off for today.
No, but I need to get to work on behind the scenes stuff and also my 23-player roster. So I'm actually really excited about this. It'll be interesting.
I am very excited about it too. I'm going to do it too because I love to pick players. It's so fun to put on that coaching hat. But Lori, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you everyone so much for joining us in the chat. And thank you for listening. If you liked this video and dropped your social media handle in the chat, look out for a DM for us because you could be our Paramount Plus subscription winner. Follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube to catch our interviews and get alerts for every time we go live, youtube.com/Attacking Third. We'll be back next Monday for another USWNT Hour. Lori's going to give you her wish list for the 23-player roster right now at this moment. But as for now, this was Lori Lindsey and Lisa Roman saying goodbye. Thanks so much for joining us.